Broussard.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for accommodating us this morning. This is very straightforward, although the number is quite large. This is simply a refinancing of some bonds. I would like to introduce Mike Weiner. He is our bond counsel from Holland & Knight. He is here as backup for Jeff, who is our resident expert. And Jeff is going to introduce the resolution and what our ask is for this morning's commission meeting. So turn it over to Jeff.
Okay, so on the agenda today at the City Commission meeting is a resolution which approves the issuance of $88,205,000 of variable rate notes for Lakeland Electric. It includes all the approval of all the documents necessary to execute that transaction. Lakeland Electric has, as part of its long-term capital profile, its debt outstanding, that amount of variable rate notes right now. Those notes are maturing on October 1st. And given that it's part of the long-term debt, they will be paid off at a point in the future between 2030 and 2038. But for now, we need to roll them over again. So that's simply what this does. It doesn't save money, it doesn't cost any money, it just rolls over the variable rate notes. We consulted with our FA about what was the best way to do that. We explored actually issuing fixed rate notes.
Financial advisor.
I'm sorry, financial advisor, our FA.
Which is something we're required to have as a municipality.
Okay. Which is why he mentions this.
Right. So, we explored a couple possibilities. One was issuing fixed rate bonds, but then we'd have to cancel some associated swap agreements. That would have cost us an extra $10 million, so we decided not to do that. We thought about going to the market and issuing variable rate notes, but the cheapest solution turns out to be to go solicit a bank loans. Banks have been very aggressive about wanting to lend over the last 5 years, about wanting to loan money to municipalities. So we did basically a mini RFP. We sent tentative documents out to 8 different banks. 5 banks actually bid on those notes. And the people, it turns out that Truist, which is the merger of SunTrust and BB&T, bid the lowest amount, the lowest formula on the variable rate notes. So this resolution and approval is to issue the notes, and they will be bought by Truist as a bank loan sale. These will have to be rolled over again in the future in 2027. These are only 5-year notes, and the long-term plan calls for paying them down between 2030 and 2038. So, I mean, that's pretty straightforward.
Questions from committee members, and then we'll...
What are the different variable rates? I mean, like, is it 1.2 to 7, or what's the low, what's the high? How about that?
Well, I don't know the answer, because how far the Federal Reserve could increase rates over the next 5 years, we don't know, so I can't give you, like, what's the right fixed rate. Right now, the rate that we'll be paying on these notes is like 3.25, 3.5, depending on how fast the Fed increases rates. But it's worth noting that we don't issue variable rate debt for LE and then just hope it doesn't go up too much. There are some interest rate swap agreements that are already in place in the exact same amount, which basically cover those notes and fix out the rate that we're paying synthetically. So when all is said and done, between the interest rate swap agreements and the variable rate notes, it's locked in at about 4.33%. It won't go above that, and it won't go below that. It's literally locked in for the next 5 years.
Question. Other questions? Jeff, risk to the city in this scenario. I mean, you touched on that a little bit, but when I look at something like this, that's always a question of what is our risk in something,
Sure.
in an issuance like this?
It's no more risky than any other kind of debt that we would issue.
Okay.
LE issues debt under a pledge that LE will execute rates and charges sufficient to pay off all the notes and all the other debt that it has outstanding, and will have coverage above and beyond the amount required for debt service for safety.
Okay.
I mean, but that's standard whether we're issuing fixed rate debt or variable rate debt. The biggest risk probably would be that we would Lakeland Electric would be downgraded for some reason, that something would happen, Lakeland Electric would be downgraded, then there's provisions in the bonds that we would actually have to pay no more on the notes if we're downgraded.
Okay.
But that's the only significant risk that I can
Okay,
think
in
of.
which we take many steps to prevent that as we
Yes.
talk
Absolutely.
regularly at utility and in our meetings. Commissioner Music?
When you're like a person that's going to go, borrow money, they're looking at like a debt to income ratio type of a thing.
Right.
So how do they, what standards are they using as far as those kind of things to keep us where we don't get downgraded? I mean, obviously we cannot continue to borrow for everything all the time without that affecting us.
So for the rating agencies, they look at a number of metrics, but probably the two most important that the rating agencies look at is debt service coverage. How much net revenue Lakeland Electric generates compared to the amount of the debt service each year. And ours is in the 2.5 times coverage range, which is sufficient for us to be in the AA category. The other thing they look at is days of cash on hand, because as they're assessing risk, they don't know what's going to happen. For example, people couldn't have anticipated how high natural gas prices were going to be. So they look to make sure that Lakeland Electric at any given time has a significant number of days of cash on hand to cover operating costs. And generally, they want to stay in the AA category where we are. They want you to be in the high 100s, 180, 190, preferably over 200 days of cash on hand, because having cash on hand can solve an awful lot of problems.
Sure.
Until you can fix them, obviously, and raise rates or fix whatever has gone wrong.
And that isolates LE as far as days cash on hand, that department itself. Okay.
There's a similar analysis that goes on for the water and wastewater debt. They rate that separately, and they look at similar metrics for water and wastewater debt. And then obviously for the city's regular debt under the covenant to budget and appropriate, they look at the number of days of cash on hand in the general fund and coverage ratios as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have one more
Commissioner
question.
Reed, yes.
Again, in reference to collateral, there is no real fixed hard asset collateral, it's just a pledge.
It's just a pledge of revenues. We do not pledge, the physical plant and what LE, the land or anything that LE has, any of that, the physical assets. It's literally a revenue pledge to say, you have first call on our revenues to pay debt service at the appropriate time, and then we promise we will have rates and charges in place sufficient to cover and pay the debt with some extra coverage on top.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Walker, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. It has nothing to do with this particular item, but it has to do with what we have an agenda under finance. And I thought it would be a good opportunity to ask, so we'll be prepared to give me an answer during commission meeting, where we had to have additional dollars spent because of the legal situations. And I think it had to do with civil rights issues and that kind of thing, but it didn't list what those particular things or particular cases were. Could we have an explanation of that during our
Sure.
time on the time of
During the agenda?
The time, yes.
So,
But
meeting,
during the
sure.
agenda, during that time when it's brought forward for us to approve.
Sure.
Because I want to make sure the public knows if you have civil rights issues, what kind of issues are we talking about? You know, or even the lawsuit cases would deal with code enforcement or whatever. Could we just have maybe some kind of a general idea of what those particular cases involve?
Sure, I'll address that.
Thank you. Mike, anything you would add to this?
No, sir, this is very straightforward. Jeff, Mike, our financial advisor, did a great job with the RFP, trying to secure the best rate that they could. So I think we're in as good a position as we could be. We'd love to be able to get this piece fixed out sooner rather than later, so we're servicing the debt. It is still part of the plan for paying it off, as Jeff talked about, but I am not a big fan of debt. And so we'd love to try to get it paid down sooner, but that's just market driven.
Okay.
So no concerns at all, no risks beyond what Jeff talked about.
Okay. A follow-up on that statement then. So when we're talking about the payoff date, right? So we kind of had a range. What would there be a range for, as opposed to saying this particular debt's going to be paid off in 2035?
Because it amortizes and pays down in pieces during that period of time.
Okay.
just as he would if he hadn't
Okay.
paid down over during that period of time, but right now it's interest only.
Gina Jacoby has a master schedule that Jeff helps her with on a regular basis that shows you by year, this is how much debt we have, this is how much we're servicing by year. And so what Jeff referenced in there was during that time frame, 30, 35, 38, in that range, it all comes down. So, right off, so, okay?
Good question. Okay.
I have one more question.
More, all right.
In reference to your just past statement, is it normal that we go ahead and pay it off, or we just kick it down the can 5 more years?
That we posed that thought to Lakeland Electric, as we do every time. And as Jeff mentioned earlier, the cost associated with fixing this out when they last looked was over $10 million. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. As long as Lakeland Electric continues to set the money aside so we can service the debt when it comes due, we're okay, right? If we had just if it was like a credit card and we weren't setting the money aside to service the debt, it would be a different story, but they're not doing that. So they're sticking to a good plan. Okay. That's it for us. Thank you for making the time.
You need a motion.
We do. Is there a motion to approve from the committee?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, thank you. Ms.
Mike?
Kelly has Jeff's notes that he spoke from that she is putting in so that you'll be
Okay.
able to read those during
Okay.
the commission meeting.
Okay.
You mean
And
they're
Jeff,
not there yet?
I'm sorry?
Well, they will be as soon as you adjourn.
Right.
I'm just waiting for you to adjourn.
Jeff or Mike, I will probably ask that one of you just give an overview and some context like you have this morning in the meeting as well. So,
And Jeff's the expert
Okay.
on this one,
Thank
so
you.
let him, thank you.
meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
All right, good day.
Mr. Mayor, when did you get